Welcome, everybody. I'm Cindy Horniman, and we also have past District Governor Ron Smith with us this evening. And tonight, we're pleased to have our last International Service webinar for this Rotary year. And tonight's topic is International Service and Global Grants. Since we have a relatively small group, if you'd like to ask questions, please feel free to ask questions, and we'll also be monitoring the chat section, but we can just have a little bit of a discussion because you're going to get a lot of information. So let's start out. So let's get back to what we're talking about. We're talking about international service tonight. And let's just think about this as any type of Rotary engagement that involves the global community where we make a positive difference. And here's our agenda. We have quite a full agenda this evening. We're going to talk about, what are global grants, how you find projects, and we're going to go through the whole application process of a global grants, give you some examples of just some of the things that our district has done, which has been a lot in global grants, and then tell you about the next steps, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So let's start with the Rotary Foundation. And we all know what the Rotary Foundation is, but the key thing that it enables Rotarians to do good in the world, that's us. You have an idea, think big, and we can make that happen and have an impact. The Rotary Foundation programs are divided into 3 broad sections. We, of course, all know about End Polio Now. We also have the Rotary Peace Centers, but what we're focusing on is the humanitarian programs, which is our grants of the Rotary Foundation. And we know that there are 2 types of grants, basically, the district grants, and tonight we're going to focus on global grants. All of the grants, as you may know, have to follow in one of our 7 areas of focus. Starting July 1st, we have a brand new area of focus that we're very excited about called Support the Environment. And within each of these area focuses, if we look at all of the projects that we do, everything follows in one of these areas of focus. And with global grants, that's even more specific. So let's start with Ron. Ron Smith, welcome.
Thank you. One thing, if you do get engaged in global grant projects, behind me is the source of the Nile, the Lake Victoria, and the Nile River leaves just behind my head here. So, so you can get to see the world with some of the best people in the world who are Rotarians. Global grants are large projects because of the match requirement and the minimum requirements. A project size of over $30,000 is required. So if your project sizes are smaller than that, it wouldn't be eligible for a global grant. It could be eligible for a district grant. And as Cindy said, they must align with one of the areas of focus. And as I'll coach you later, please, when you make a grant application, pick one area of focus, because your grant always has an emphasis. You might touch on the others, and it doesn't get you any extra brownie points to pick them all. In fact, it gets you a lot more work and more difficulty in getting it approved. It must have an international partner, which means your partnering club has to be outside the United States if you're partnering with a club. And there must be an international partner and a host partner. The World Fund match currently has been 1-to-1 for district designated funds. If you went to grant training last night, maybe you learned about it, but the district has an allocation based on what was given to our annual fund by Rotarians in our district 3 years ago. And when that comes back, a certain portion of it goes to district grants, and the remaining of it sits there and it can support global grants and a few other things. But our district uses most of that for global grants. So when a district applies DDF to a global grant project, it's going to get matched 1-to-1 until May 30th this year. After May 30th, for grants that come in for the next Rotary year, it'll be funded only by 80% instead of 100% match from the World Fund. So that's changing. Any cash contribution starting last year is not matched at all. In fact, there's a small 5% surcharge for money that hasn't been held by the foundation for 3 years. So it helps pay for the administrative costs of any of these moving of funds around the world and administering grants. And any global grant has to have very measurable outcomes. In fact, there's always an M&E, measurement and evaluation, part of your global grant application in terms of what are you going to measure and what are your expected results as you're applying for the grant. Next slide. The key elements of any international project, and especially when you're at the global grant level, is to have a really strong idea and vision about what potentially you could do in an area. You have to have partners. You're not going to do it by yourself. In fact, you have to have a host partner. But many, many times there's other partners, whether it's Drexel University, whether it's Mediators Without Borders, whether it's some organization in the host country that is participating in the project. You have to be passionate. These things take time. These things take a lot of perseverance. You have to be committed. You have to have a partner who's been approved. They have a grant training program, etc. Okay. What happens in June? I see any grant. It's kind of the dead period. Any grant that's submitted after May 30th will go into the next year and won't be eligible. Okay, Cindy, back for me.
I did.
I just answered a question that Gail asked. So kind of for this year, okay. June is kind of an intermediate period. You have to have some experience, whether it's your host has the experience or whether you have, or whether your partner has to have it. You have to meet a community need. In fact, a few years back, one of the main requirements of any global grant now is to have a very formal community assessment. And there's a form to fill out. There's a book about this thick that Rotary, you can download from rotary.org and download that and learn about what community assessment means. But it's a formal process going into the host area and basically asking them what they need. For you saying, I want to do a well, and then go in and tell a community, I'm going to drill a well for you, but they really don't need a well, they need something else, the project isn't going to go too far. So as a result of that, a lot of Rotarians like to push projects. We like to see the community pulling the project. So measurements and data, they're very specific things. If you're doing a water and sanitation grant, or if you're doing a maternal and child health or peace and conflict resolution, there are very specific measurement goals that Rotary asks you to measure, as well as you can add some others. You need a commitment for financing. And what financing means is, where is the money coming from that the Rotary Foundation is going to match potentially? Is the district going to give district designated funds? Is the host district going to give designated funds? Is there a donor in the country that's hosting? Is there a donor in your area that's going to donate through your club? And so you put together your financing plan, and before you submit your application formally, the budget has to equal the financing. So you have to come up, and part of that formula is what's the match and what's the leverage that's being given according to the 1-to-1 formula, or now the 80% formula. You must have, you don't have to have cooperating organizations, but many times they benefit it. The next slide. Once the need is identified, you really need to take some action and develop project plans. You pull together your partners. Communicating internationally is not easy. As I learned in Uganda and that part of Africa, they tell you, you Americans, you guys have watches and you keep things very precise. Us people in East Africa, we have time. So it's kind of always a challenge to get them to move, because they have their own challenges. They don't have the kind of discretionary time we have. Travel is difficult. Cash is difficult for them. The community assessments need to be done by your partner. I mean, you can help them with it, or you can go over and help them conduct it, depending if that need is required. The vision really needs to become then consistent with the community assessment and with the cooperating organizations. Next slide. Once you have a project, and I was speaking to someone from Springfield, Flowertown, and someone's online today, but I asked the club, well, what area of focus is your Rwanda project gonna fit? Well, it's at a school, but it's for a kitchen, and you're kind of challenged with, is it really community and economic development? Is it basic education and literacy? But if it's to build a kitchen to help support the needs of the school, maybe it's community and economic development. So what you do is you go to the area of focus policy statements, and that's a document you can download online through the Grant Center. And when you download it, you look at each area of focus and you say, well, my project has these elements. And what you're going to find in that policy statement is bullets that say, if you're doing water and sanitation, the project must have, for example, a WASH component, water and sanitation and hygiene training. And if you don't have that and you just want to drill a well, well, your project's not going to get approved because it didn't meet all the areas of focus policy statements. So if you find out that economic and community development has most of the bullets that your project has, then you would select that area. You really then design your project around the area of focus, because one of the things Rotary International is going to do during the review process is send it to the area of focus manager. And he or she is going to look at it and say, well, okay, it has all the elements of an economic and community development, or a majority of them, and they're addressing the points correctly. If they're not, then they send it back to you. They never reject. They might send it back to you for improvement. They make suggestions, and if you listen to them and make those changes, then they'll approve it. If you don't, then it'll sit on the vine for quite a while and potentially be rejected. Okay, next slide. The other thing is you want to look at the terms and conditions. Rotary International has, I forget how many pages to this document, 10 or 11 pages that say the do's and don'ts of Rotary Foundation grant money. For example, you can't build certain kind of structures. You can build simple schools and low-cost shelters now. That was a recent addition. And there's a definition, another document that says if you want to build a building, something like a single-story, 3-room steel roof that's going to house a kitchen or house a small school or a small health clinic would be eligible, but a multi-story addition to a building and things like that. There are other things that you can't do, like fund a religious organization. So you read these terms and conditions to make sure the elements of your project are meeting all the terms and conditions. Okay, next slide. And then probably the biggest challenge everybody has is with sustainability. The matching grant projects of years ago, you could buy a set of computers and send them to Victoria Falls in Africa, and you were done. You felt the project was good, but it would never be approved today. Sending a fire engine to Peru, or sending some other kind, water filters to another country and just drop them there, aren't going to pass the sustainability rules. The most important things are the 6 steps to sustainability: using local materials, having assessed the community needs, finding a local funding source, because really a key piece is when the project is finished and the Rotary funding is finished, does the benefit continue in the host country, in the community? So how are they going to sustain the water pump? How are they going to maintain the school? Are there going to be teachers available to teach in the school? How are you going to continue the benefit? And so these are key pieces of what sustainability is. Next slide. So sustainability does mean certain things to certain people, but to Rotary it means very specific things. If you say, hey, that computer is going to last a long time and it's going to sustain that student, well, that's not good enough. Okay, it's really like, is that computer going to be able to be replaced? Are there spare parts for it? Did you send the computer, or did you buy it at a local shop in your host country so that someone there has responsibility for it? And by the way, how is that school going to replace the computer, or replace the whatever else you bought for them? Or probably the water well is a good example. if you have a diesel engine that's pumping, who's going to keep buying the fuel? And in your grant, you have to be very specific about who's responsible for the maintenance of that pump and how are they going to buy fuel. Many times if you put a solar powered pump in, you don't have to discuss fuel. You do have to discuss maintenance and the replacement after X amount of years for that, because they want to contain. And usually it's a 7 to 10 year time frame that we want to see at least some support for that project. So next slide. You need a detailed project plan, and the sooner you can have a project scope, the better. It's the scope of the project that you're going to have to come to us, the district grant committee, and say, what is the scope of the project? I'm going to develop a water well that's going to support a community of 5,000 people, and it's going to need a borehole that is this deep. Here's the hydraulic plan that my host partner came, and they have land to be able to do it, and the land looks like it has water. And so they have all those elements. Then our district grant committee is much more, feels much better to approve the project to start the arduous process of getting a global grant entered online. You really want to develop a draft budget, and you want to have a draft financing plan. Talk to the district, talk to clubs, talk to people in your community who might be diaspora of that particular part of the world that you can tap for funding cash, and use that source for your club to be able to make some of its cash commitments to the project. And make sure that you kind of have a good idea of how you're going to fund it. If the project is a $45,000 borehole project, and it's going to be $15,000 for the drilling and $6,000 for the tanks and $3,000 for the piping and kiosks and the security fence, and then you have a budget. It's kind of good to go in there with kind of a straw man budget, and then with your partner, you can develop that, or you can submit a draft to them and they can correct it, because in Uganda it's 3,600 Ugandan shillings per US dollar. So, they know how many shillings it costs, and we just do the conversion if you know the local currency exchange. So next slide. How do you fund a project? In our district, we have I don't say we're totally unique, but we have a very interesting pay it forward concept. When a club says, I want to do a project in Uganda, they're going to say, well, I need 30,000 district designated funds, because I want to get at least 30,000 in the old days, a one-to-one match of Rotary Foundation World Fund match. So that means I got to tell the district, how is my club or partner clubs of mine that I've convinced to submit money to the annual fund, and pay the annual fund back, so that in the future another club can do another project, because the annual fund monies, if it keeps coming in the front door, there'll be money out the back door to do global grants. As I mentioned, you might have cash. In the old days, cash was matched 50 cents to the dollar, but a year ago, they stopped that match on cash because not enough annual fund contributions are coming in. And that's the reason why we're cutting back on how much the Rotary World Fund now matches with district designated funds. So keep those annual funds coming in. Mike McCarthy's glad I'm saying that, because we're always driving the reason for why do we give to the Rotary Foundation's annual fund is so we can do bigger, better, bolder projects and have clubs more engaged in worldwide community projects. You can put on Rotary Showcase, you can say that you have a project that's going on and you need money. There's a matchinggrants.org website where you can, it's like a project marketplace where you can get clubs to go out there. And if your club is looking to do a water project somewhere in the world and you didn't care exactly where, and you had no one in your club that was really specifically a specialist or in the district, but you just wanted to give to a water project, you can go to matchinggrants.org, filter water projects, look at countries, and actually make commitments to other people's projects. And so if you have your project and a shortage of needs, you can actually list it there. You can go to corporations, you can go to other foundations. Rotary Foundation went to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to fund our Polio Plus program. So Rotary has a history of going into other foundations to contribute. If you're doing an eye project, the Rotary Action Group for Preventable Blindness has a program where they give $2,000 to any global grant that has a preventable blindness project in anywhere in the world. So you can have that as supplemental cash funding that goes into that. So Rotary Action Groups are another place. And I think that last International Service Committee meeting in February covered Rotary Action Groups. And then you build a budget with your host partner. And your host partner, you know, those districts have some money and some of the clubs have money, and you'd like to see them have some funds in the game as well to make sure there's some financial commitment on their part as well. So, and they have to have some level of commitment. Next slide. There is a proposal online form. You go to our Rotary District 7430.org website. You go up under Foundation, you click it, and you see grants, and you click it, and you go into some documents that you'll see, and one of them is the Global Grant Proposal Form, and that's what's here on your screen. And basically, it's one page. It's a scope of work kind of brief description. It's in what's your area of focus. It's who's your host partner, what's the project size, how much of DDF do you expect you're going to be requesting, and then some signatures of your president and president-elect for the expected funding year. So in this case here, if you're submitting it, it's probably going to be July after that you're going to submit it. So it would be your next year's president, and the president following would be signing for this. And the reason for both of them to sign it is they understand that this is a commitment the club's making, both of time and of money, and it's not just a one-year thing. Because most global grants, from the day you think about an idea, speak to your club and partner overseas, it's probably 12 to 24 months before you get the grant application submitted. It's not that Rotary takes that long to approve it. I'll go through the approval process. In fact, the approval process, if you have all the ducks lined up, are 6 to 8 weeks, except when you submit them in June. And then there's a big backlog because everyone, or you submit it before a deadline, like one-to-one match of DDF. There's going to be so many global grants that get submitted between today and May 30th that the grant staff is going to have a real hard time committing to a 6 to 8 week approval process. And then once that is submitted by March 31st this year, and every year, we like to see it so that we can get your club's project in what I call the Global Grant District Designated Fund Allocation Pipeline. We need to know what's in the pipeline so that we know that the funds that are coming available to the district will likely be available for allocation to their project. So I don't know, Mike, how many we have in the pipeline right now? 6 or 7?
Yeah.
Global grants in the pipeline, not at the approval stage, but in the pipeline total. What's that?
I think we have 6 right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a partner and a host? A partner can be your host, so I'm using that term loosely. The host club is the country in which the project's running. If we're running a project in Allentown and you have an international partner from Japan and they're a Rotary club, then Allentown would be the host club. If you're in Rwanda and you have a Rwandan Rotary club, they're the host club, they're your partner, but then to be confusing, your cooperating organizations are partners too. But specifically, the host club is your closest partner. Okay, so I'm just using that term loosely, but the host club, international club and the host club are kind of the official designations. To even start a Rotary grant, you have to have a person identified from each of those 2 clubs, the international club, sponsor club and the host club. Okay,
Gail, does that answer your question about hosts and partners the way Ron explained it?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, for example, in the project with maternal and child health, I have Drexel University, Jefferson University Hospital, Macquarie University, Busatima. I'm trying to think of what else. They're all partners, but the host club is, and they're a partner too. The host club is Rotary Club of Kampala North. So that's kind of the lingo. A district has, you as a club have to have a global grant MOU. There's a district grant MOU, which are memorandums of understanding that you learned maybe about last night or one of the previous grant approvals. And then there's a global grant one. And why they're different is there's different requirements by Rotary International. If you're receiving money from the Rotary Foundation to fund a project either in the host country, or the international club has some responsibility for receiving funds. So it has a little different level of things that you agree to. And so that's a different one. So if you are thinking about doing a global grant and you're in the process of writing the grant, then having an MOU for the global grants required. And you get that form also on a Rotary District 7430 website. And then once the grant committee sometime in April approves your project conditionally, then you're in the district designated fund pipeline, and then there's a lot of other things that need to get done. And the next thing to be done is to go ahead to the grant center and open up a grant application with your host club partner. Next slide. We have a lot of advice that you can get. The district grant committee, many of us are online tonight. The International Service Committee, some of us are technical cadre members. There is Rotary International has a technical cadre in every area of focus who have experts that can help you. Rotary Action Groups have very strong consultant help if you're struggling with, well, what does a water and sanitation and hygiene teaching program look like? You can go to the Rotary Action Group and get some templates of what a training program in water and sanitation and hygiene for washing of hands, and how do you keep the water area clear and clean and hygiene. We have district, zone, and local mentoring. I'm a mentor, Mike's a mentor. I know many of us who have written grants are all part of that. So Cindy's putting up a slide here that shows that she has a responsibility for the International Service Committee, and we do a lot of support for clubs who are in the grant process. We have other things like Shelter Box and other projects that we help support through our work, and so we support that. I'm the Global Grant Subcommittee Chair. So it's really through me that I will be working with you to get your grant applications and proposal forms to the shape that we can approve it. Frank is the International Service Committee Literacy and I guess Rotary Foundation Committee. Bob Hobau is a WashRag member. I don't know if we call it WashRag anymore, but it's a Water and Sanitation and Hygiene Rotary Action Group. Jim, who's online tonight, has Rotary Peace. If you have peace and conflict and projects, I shouldn't even say that anymore, Jim, sorry, it's peace and what? Peace building project. Area Peace Shelter Box, Friendship Exchange, Rotoplast, and International Service Global Grants Committee. So those folks there in the district that you have there on that slide are key people in helping you formulate your plans for any international project that may or may not grow into a global grant. So go ahead, Cindy. The global grant life cycle, this is a confusing diagram, but it's one that Rotary International provides us. It kind of tells you about the process that goes on once you hit the submit button. On the global grant portal, which we'll discuss in a moment, through My Rotary, part of the website, you get into the grant center, and then there's about 8 areas on the grant application that need to be completed and filled out. And when all is done, and a budget and a financing and all those things are approved, a little button will light up and you hit it, and it's called submit. Okay. And what submit means is all the little pieces are finished, and it's time for Rotary International grant staff to look at your application. I would strongly urge that prior to even getting to that step, that you review the grant application with the Rotary grant staff member, and if they have time, it's less and less, it's not as easy to do as it used to, but you contact them, and there's a Rotary staff person for every district in the world. You go to the Rotary staff contact form and you look at what district you're looking to work within, whether it's Rwanda or whether it's Guatemala or whether it's Zambia. And you say, okay, well, that's district XXX, and Rebecca Mendoza has responsibility for that, for example. She has a phone number, an email address, and you contact them and say, look, I've got this grant that has these elements. I think it's ready to submit. Do you have any suggestions? It's nice to get them in the formulation process than when you think you're finished process. And that can help a lot. So once it's submitted, the staff reviews the application. So the contact person for Uganda or Guatemala, she or he gets that application and reads it. She looks at the terms and conditions, or he does. They look at is the host club approved? Is the international club approved? Are there any outstanding issues with the clubs? Does the budget, does the financing equal this? And all those things should have been automatic anyways. And then he or she passes it on to another colleague for a secondary review, usually an area of focus review. And then depending on the level of how much money you're asking from the World Fund, it might go to another level of review. If you're asking $250,000, or I guess $150,000 from the Rotary Foundation World Fund, it's going to end up at the board level, which only meets 4 times a year. So how much money you're asking for will determine how many review steps are. And then you're into the payment phase. You're going to get a congratulations, your grant's been approved, but here's your checklist. And there's a checklist that has 5 or 6 bullets on it. Signatures of the club presidents, open up a bank account. When the funds that you committed are there in the bank account, we'll send the money. There might be a few other conditions as well. They might want some copies of some quotes from your suppliers, for example. And then when all that's done, Rotary wires money to the bank account that's in the country that's the host. If you're doing a VTT, sometimes money gets split and goes to the host and the international partner. And depending on where the money is being spent, the money will be sitting in a bank account all by itself. You can't mix funds between Rotary Club's operating money or other project money and the grant money. So, okay. And then you get into the reporting phases. The reporting phases, 12 months after you get your money, your report comes due and you have 60 days to report. If your project's not done, it's an interim report. If your project has all the funds spent and you've finished it, you'd call it a final report, and then you file all the proper documents that are needed, receipts, photos, descriptions of what you did, etc. So, and then the project is finished. So that's it. So thanks. Next slide. Resource network. Wrong way. This is what the grant.
What the heck? Sorry about that.
What are you doing?
Okay, now.
All right. Next slide. There you go. When you go to myrotary.org and you go up under either Action or Rotary Foundation, you'll find your way to the Grant Center. When you click Grant Center, and I'm not sure if this is an old screen, it looks something like this. And at this point in time, you say apply for a grant. And there's a button up top that says apply for a grant. Now, before you do that, we want the district grant committee to have looked at your proposal and give you the tentative okay to go to the next steps. Whether it's you or whether it's the host country club that you're working with starts the grant. Either of you can do it, okay? It depends on who's better at it, who's got more information. But once it's open, then there's a bunch of questions to answer. What's the title of your project? Having a compelling title and a very concise title is good. Then it's going to want to know who are the clubs that are the partners, the International Host Club and the International Partner Club and the Host Club. Who are the individuals in those clubs that are going to take responsibility? What is the area of focus? And once you have that, voila, you can open up a draft grant application. So it's simple to open up the draft. But sometimes these draft applications can sit there for years because it takes people a lot more time to get the rest of the information. At the RI level, there's no grant application deadlines except when Rotary changes the rules. So this year, Rotary changes the district designated fund rules. Last year, they changed the cash match rules. So then all of a sudden you have kind of an artificial deadline. But you can just keep submitting. It's a rolling process, but our district tries to get people to get their proposal forms in by March 31st. If you get one that's really urgent and it's October and you don't want to wait till March, please submit that proposal form to me or Cindy, and we can sometimes get a quick review if there's a compelling reason to be reviewing it prior to the March 31st date. Okay, and then if you are doing travel, and right now Rotary Foundation has suspended any Rotary Foundation funded travel due to COVID. So even existing grants like the one I have with vocational training team exchanges were on hold for the last year and probably for maybe another year before we're traveling on Rotary Foundation. But when you are able to travel, you have to have your grant application in at least 90 days, okay, prior to travel. I would make sure you do it much more than that if you can, because you know you get the approval and then you have to get visas and all that other stuff, and it takes a while. So 90 days is like the bare minimum. Next slide. As we mentioned, just kind of review, the proposal is drafted. There's all kinds of questions. Here's just an indication. You can see the various steps. You have basic information, who are the committee members, what's the project overview, what's the area of focus, and I would strongly urge, unless there's some compelling reason, you pick one. Because if you pick two, you'll find out that the measurement and evaluations section doubles, because there's a measurement and evaluation section for each area of focus that's very specific to the area of focus. And there's extra questions you need to answer and come up with more documentation on sustainability if you pick two areas of focus. I mean, you can do a project that has elements of all, you know, making water available to the Maasai in Kenya is peace building. So is it a peace building grant? No, okay. So really you want to pick the one that's very specific and meets many of those sustainability policy statement bullets. And then in there, you're going to have to submit a separate document called the community assessment. Okay. Next slide. Here's an example. It's an eye chart of a budget, but when you get into the actual form, I always say do an Excel spreadsheet budget first, and then go ahead, and once you have that close to what you want, then you go into the Rotary budget form online and you create an expense item. And then you have to say, well, is it travel? Is it administrative? Is it, I'm trying to think of different categories. And then you got to put down what it's for and who the supplier is. The supplier can be very generic or it can be very specific depending on what you're asking for. If it says, you know, water drilling, borehole, is a description, you can put local borehole driller as the supplier. And then maybe in the body of your report, you'd have several quotes. And in the attachments, you'd have several quotes. Okay. Next slide. Measurement evaluation. If you have maternal and child health and it drops down, it's going to ask how have you improved infant mortality? How have you improved maternal mortality? How many midwives have you trained? You know, so there's going to be very specific measurements, and you can add some of your own measurements, and there are some very standard measurements depending on the area focus as well. And so that's a very important part of it. And there's another document that Rotary has on M&E monitoring and evaluation supplement for how do you fill that section out. Next slide. As we said about the application process, this is pretty redundant. So you can go to the next slide, Cindy. So now your grant is submitted and it's been approved because the area focus person loved it. Your regional grant officer sent it on with high remarks because you had such good coaching at the district level, or a technical cadre or Rotary Action Group input, and now it's approved. So next slide. Like I said, you're probably going to get an approval with the checklist conditions, and the host club gets many more conditions than the international club because one, they have to have the bank account open, and in foreign countries opening up bank accounts is not a simple thing sometimes. And then they have to have, if there's cash that's built into the financing plan, the cash has to be in that bank account prior to Rotary Foundation sending them their portion to the project. It has to be signed by the presidents of each club, and it might be several others. And then once the money's in, now the grant can start if it doesn't require monies, but the grant cannot start before approval. Once approval's indicated and received, you could start the grant as long as you don't need money. If there's things you really want to start in earnest to get a head start, but sometimes it can take 1 to 6 months. Sorry, and sometimes it takes that long to get the money into that bank account because the person who opens up the bank account is in Switzerland and won't be back to the country until 3 months later, and no one else knows how to open up a bank account. So there's a lot of stories that go on why it takes so long to get the money there. So, and then the project starts. Go ahead, next slide. Keep going, oh, wrong way.
Huh, how come that's
you're
doing
you're going backwards. There you go. I mentioned the checklist items. And then what do you do as the international partner? I mean, you're kind of sitting there in Springfield, Flower Town, and those folks are over in Rwanda, and you're saying, well, what am I going to do now? Well, having quarterly Zoom meetings and asking for updates is something that the international partner should do. Kind of keep their, feet to the fire, as you might say, in a friendly way, because there's nothing like getting progress when you ask for a progress report. And then getting them to send you photos. Maybe you can help them. Maybe you can travel once you can travel. Maybe the Rotary Foundation didn't fund the travel, but you can do personal travel to go over there and participate in a health fair that may or may not be related directly to your project, but it's a wonderful way to participate, help them with their public image, write blogs for them, etc. So there's a lot of things you can do when you're an international partner. Generally, on big projects like ones I've been engaged with, a progress report every quarter works quite well. And they give you some, update on the budget. They show you some of the bank accounts. You don't wait until final report, because if they're going around scraping up all the receipts at the final report, after 18 to 36 months, good luck. So collect them on the way. Okay. And if they need some help managing the project and helping takes the barriers down, that works well. Thanks. Next slide. I think public image and publicity. Rotary Showcase is a wonderful way for the Rotary Rotarian magazine to pick up something on your project. I would just keep writing articles for Rotary Showcase. It's kind of like a blog, and make it a very compelling, wonderful story, 1 or 2 photos, 400 or 500 words, about great things you're doing in Zambia. Okay. And all of a sudden you might end up in the Rotarian magazine, either that little international project section or maybe a full-blown article, etc. So, and then help them really figure out how are you going to make this sustainable. Maybe if it's a water well all the way up in the Maasai villages far away from Rotary clubs, maybe you can help them start a Rotary Community Corps. And that Rotary Community Corps is going to help sustain the water well, because that Rotary Community Corps, like a adult Rotaract club, is going to be responsible for collecting the 1 penny per 5 gallons that they get for fresh water, if that's what's affordable, so that when they do have to buy a pump, they have money in the bank account. So that's something as a Rotarian you can help with, and that's going to really make it more sustainable. Things change. Our project has changed tremendously. Maternal and child health, for example, COVID hit. We had to cancel our VTT back to the U.S. Probably we're not going to have any back here in the term of the project. So now we're reallocating that money. One of the things we did is we asked Rotary Foundation, look, you know, these midwives need to survive COVID. Can we buy PPE equipment? There's $6,000 that we need to buy PPE equipment for the 5 or 6 health centers that we've been working with on our project. Immediately, we got the yes, go ahead and do it. Changes in scope. You know, when you write a project of a certain size, the scope may change. Rotary Foundation is quite flexible if you fall within the basic mission to drill the well or do basic literacy and education, and you need to reallocate money from travel to equipment or other things. And so you just stay communicative with your Rotary person who's going to be responsible for that grant, the grant officer. So online reporting and use the grant tool. Basically, the online reporting is once every 12 months, but you might send supplemental reports to the grant officer, especially when there's been some significant change or some very significant occurrence. If the president of Guatemala stopped by to see your project and added more money to the project, then that's a great thing to tell the Rotary Foundation. Okay, so those kind of things. So be communicative. Next slide. I started a blog for our project. That's something you might want to consider yourselves, because the blog becomes a way to communicate well beyond your host and international partner club. And when any other club says, well, what are you doing? You know, I want to know what if you've got some money from some of the Rotary clubs in our district to help, they're going to say, well, what are you doing? You can give them a link to the blog. And in that blog, you know, there's a series of kind of like a diary of how the project went. Social media, Facebook, newsletter. I'm sure the zone would like certain. Mike occasionally has to get an article to the RRFC for some, which is the Regional Rotary Foundation Coordinator, to say, hey, what is District 7430 doing with foundation monies? Okay. I think the Rotary Voices got ended, but Rotary Showcase still exists, and that's through myrotary.org. So next slide. Just some examples. Cindy, did you want to go over these? Or you want me to cover these?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I think we are so fortunate in our district in that we have done some amazing things with global grants. And what's more important, we have done them in just about every area of focus. So I'm going to just go through a couple highlights, and some of you may know about some of these, but while you're thinking about doing grants, it helps you get ideas. So you heard Ron mention, and I was there when Ron started this project, and it just shows where you come up with an idea because you've met somebody, and that idea turns into a huge project. Ron initiated with a guy he met in Kampala, Uganda during, I believe, his district governor training, and kept in touch. The next thing you know, it turned into 3 global grants. that's now up to $250,000, initially starting with $80,000. It was one of the first vocational training teams in the world and one of the first in maternal, child, and health. And the original focus was to reduce infant mortality in Uganda. And now look at all of the things that it has done. Additionally, our district needs to be even more proud because this project was recognized recently by the World Health Organization. This is our district. These are our regular Rotary clubs. So what can start out small can just expand. All it takes is ideas. That was maternal child health. We also have started one of the first peace projects our district has ever been involved with. Jim Palmquist from Emmaus is on the club. We are currently working on our first peace project. It's a grant of a little bit less than $100,000. It has just started and it's training women in Western Africa, in Nigeria regarding peace. And that project's just going, they're going in the villages, they've started, and it shows how creative we've had to be as the result of COVID. Because originally the project was going to be in-person training, and now much of it's done by Zoom. But we had some calls the other day where there were people from numerous countries around the world finding out about this. This is how we can have an impact on peace. Our district has done a number of water and sanitation global grants, and we talk about partners. Several years ago, the Emmaus Club, the Allentown West Club, got involved with some of our members were part of Engineers Without Borders. We have now partnered in Sierra Leone as well as the Dominican Republic on 2 water and sanitation projects, as well as a school project in Sierra Leone and a hospital project, working with Engineers Without Borders. And that's an organization for you to really consider. There are chapters all around the world. Rotary's good at the contacts. Rotary's good at the fundraising, but the engineers know how to design those projects. We've also done about numerous projects. We've done a water well and we help roadways in Nigeria. We've done several projects in India, including build dams, and there's more projects in India. And we did a water filter project as well in Peru. Those are just some of the things in water and sanitation. We also did a literacy. We were one of the first vocational training teams in literacy with secondary education in Zambia. And this project was planned to do phase 2 last year, and we got a little bit stymied. But what this project did is we had a group of teachers from the East Penn School District go to Zambia, and then we had some teachers come from the Science and Social Science Center from Zambia here. And the whole purpose was to help the children in the science and social sciences, based on what the community told us, to work more with technology. In this country, there's like 80 kids per classroom, and everything was being done manually on the chalkboard. So it was teaching the teachers by using equipment how to do lesson plans. We started out small with lots of science equipment for experiments, but also with some laptops and projectors that would teach the lessons online to the students, which are still being used today. As of now, we were about to start phase 2, which would be to expand the ability to teachers to have more technologies and transfer all of their lesson plans. Unfortunately, we have been waylaid by COVID. Another school now in the community is interested, and it shows how one small idea. As the result of that project, we also started one of the first volunteer service projects internationally, where we had a group of 12 people actually go to Zambia and help paint some schools and also have fun. Another small idea can turn into multiple projects. But we also have a lot of resources that we can provide you. You're not alone. So we told you we have the District 7430 network resource. You saw the list of people. If you have an idea of a project, talk to one of us. We can tell you where to go. You have there's so much stuff available to us in Rotary. Sometimes it gets overwhelming, but start out by talking to one of us and we can help you. So to-dos as we get to the end. If you are going to be working on a Rotary Global Grant project for the next Rotary year, please get your proposal, that one-page form, into us by the end of March. If you don't think you're quite going to make it, or you're talking about a project, talk to us so we can try to plan for it. We'll help you with getting the paperwork and all of that in. Okay, so we had several objectives in this session, and we hope we have accomplished them. We told you how you can initiate global grants. Mostly, how do you translate a grant idea into action? You've learned about all of the roles that advisors can play. You learned about the website, you know the approval process, and you know that Rotary has a very strict steward fund. So now, you're not alone. Remember, we're here to help you. The global grant application process is a very detailed process. I can tell you sometimes you do feel overwhelmed, but you know what? When you see the results of your projects, it is just so worthwhile. And again, we're here to help you. Now we're going to open it up for some questions. Is there anything anybody would like to know or ask or say? Michael McCarthy.
Cindy, if I could just say one thing. Cindy talked about the rigor that you go through, and Ron did as well, with questions coming back to you from the grant staff at Rotary. The whole reason for doing that is to make sure that your project is going to be successful. Your project is going to do what you want it to do. It's going to yield the benefit for the people that you want it to yield. And as Cindy mentioned, it may be frustrating. It may seem like they're really nitpicking, but it's only so that project will succeed.
Questions, comments, anything you'd like to say? Yes, Gail, what would you like to know?
Well, this was all very fabulous, but I guess my basic question is, how do you really decide what type of global project you would want to do? I mean, there's a lot of information, and if you're not familiar with those countries, how would you sort of make a decision or even start the process of thinking what you might want to do and what country you might want to do it in?
You start there's several things. If it's your first club's global grant, sometimes it's easier to find out what is going on in the district and
Okay.
partner with another club in our district for something that's going on, so that you can look at the process and see it. Okay. If you
Okay.
want to start something fresh, I can tell you there's probably somebody in your Rotary Club who has a contact in some country. Go to the Rotary.org website and look at the Rotary Showcase. You will be overwhelmed with the projects that are available.
I think the most successful projects, Cindy, are the ones that are homegrown in your own club.
That's right.
Someone travels. They were in Central America. They were in Belize, and they stopped at a Rotary Club, and the Rotary Club presented them an idea. Well, they bring that back with so much passion, and they convince the club to support them. I would say 90% of the larger global grants in our district come in exactly that way. There's a Rotarian or a community member who becomes a Rotarian who brings that to your club. It's very seldom where a club says, hey, out of all the areas of focus, I want to do environment. let's go look for an environment project. Let's go shopping. Well, there are places you can. Okay, you can go to matchinggrants.org. You can go to the Rotary Showcase on My Rotary, and you can filter out and say water. You can say environmental projects. You can go to the Rotary Action Group for Environment. I forget what the name of it is specifically, and you can shop their site for ideas. It's very seldom that's how it happens. The ones that are going to be most successful are the ones that ignite a passion, take a passion from your local area or someone in your club.
Okay. Thank
Anybody
you.
else? Any
Yeah,
questions?
could I throw a couple words in there?
You may.
What Ron says and Cindy says is completely right, but I got involved in this West Africa peace building project through a different way. I have a background in facilitation. I'm interested in mediation and peace building. And I was doing some networking, and I happened to be in Portland, Oregon, traveling with my wife. And there was an event at the New York City Rotary Club that I was going to miss because I was in Portland, and I was aggravated because I had encouraged. It was MBBI's president was speaking at the Rotary Club of New York, and I'm looking at the email, and it turns out the email comes from the Rotarian Action Group for Peace in Portland. So
Wow.
instead of going to hear the speaker in New York City, I made an appointment with the executive director of the Rotary Action Group for Peace. She connected me to a Rotarian down at the San Pedro Rotary Club, past president, a guy that's a mediator and a Rotarian, and he connected me to the West African Project. So it's a passion, but it was actually done through networking and through the Rotary Action Group for Peace and whatever. So.
But
That's
then
sort of an unusual way to get
you
in.
brought that passion to the club and to your district. So
Yeah, it's sort of a funny way to get in, but it's another, look around what you're interested in and talk to people. If you want to talk to me, talk to me. I don't know that much about Rotary, but we can network into things, and particularly if you have an interest or a passion you want to push, because these projects are hard, and it'd be good to have a lot of interest and drive to execute them.
Well, the idea is if you have an idea, go for it.
Yeah.
And that's what Rotary does. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments, anything you'd like to know?
Yeah, I have just a question on because the 80% now. So if we have say a grant, we're going for $30,000. In the past, it would be $15,000 a district would put in and be matched 100%. So now only $12,000 would be matched.
Correct.
So it's up
That's
to the
correct.
local clubs to make up that difference.
Yes.
or more DDF from other
Or
places.
more, right. Or you got to find partners other places
Or you ask for more DDF,
or ask for more DDF.
which obligates the club to put in more to the annual fund. but
Yeah. In the end, the club would have to pay more unless you found another partner. It's this next few months, and with this change, we're going to have a couple challenges, and we'll just all have to work together.
I mean, none of us know how long that match will stay at 80%, but 2 to 3 years wouldn't be surprising.
That's
I don't
correct.
know, Mike, what you think.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
it'll certainly be, there'll be people pushing for it to be raised back to 100% in a couple of years, probably in a year. But I would say the trustees are probably going to wait about 3 years and see how things stabilize. If the contributions and the demand are matched, then the reason for that goes away. But if the demand is much higher than the contributions, they have to do something to make up the difference, to recognize that. I think Juan had his hand up for a question.
Yes, Mike, thank you. On the issue of contributions, how are the contributions for global grants counted for the club? What I mean is, if our club members contribute a certain amount of money for this coming year, for this present Rotary fiscal year, that money that has been sent in, will that count as a club's contribution? Or what happens if the club wants to contribute, say, we have more or less a reserve of $5,000 for the project we're working on in Guatemala right now. which is sort of put aside specifically for this purpose. If we get more Rotarians from our club to contribute more money, and that would be sent directly to the Rotary Foundation, will that count also as a club contribution?
Well, it would count as a club contribution toward that grant project. It would not count as the contribution that would replenish the annual fund
Yeah.
because it doesn't go into the annual fund.
Yeah. No, what we want to do is contribute to the Rotary Foundation, not specifically to the project,
Right.
to the Rotary Foundation. And my question is, will that,
Yes.
how do you know how much money that our club has contributed? By
It has to carry the designation annual fund share.
correct.
And it basically is an honor system. You're Rotarians. If a club asks for $15,000, $20,000, whatever in DDF, the club is obligated to replace that money, whether the club does it itself or it goes to other clubs and recruits them to help replenish the annual fund by increasing their level of contribution by a certain amount. That really doesn't make any difference, but it's the club that's making the request that is looked to make the arrangements to make sure that everything is, that the amount of money requested is replaced.
Mike,
Yeah.
Mike,
The
did you-
district gets the report, Juan. So Mike knows what each club gave last year and what they gave this year to the annual fund. So by looking at that report, we know that your club made a significant increase in their annual fund contribution. So there is a report level that we can look at.
and it's also kind of not like if it's a considerable amount of money, I don't say $20,000, the commitment on that club can be over a couple of years to replace that. It doesn't have to be done all at 1 year, correct?
Absolutely. It could be, if the club
We
is really,
take installment plans, yeah.
Ah, yes.
and we don't charge interest on that.
Basically, what we want to do is to get other clubs in our district interested in this thing. So for us to get $15,000 would be, for our club, Morrisville Yardley, would be a bit too much to get from our club, but we want to get 2 or 3 other clubs interested.
Also, Juan, that's a great way for a club that hasn't had any experience with global grants to dip its toe in the water, because you're going to be reporting to them on what their support has made possible.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you.
So you can contact Gail's club, and maybe she wants to support a literacy
I
project
think
in
they are.
Guatemala.
Gail has been a tremendous help
Yeah.
to us in the last few months, yes.
I think that they are, Ron, by the way. So anything else? Any other questions? Well, great. Thank you, everybody, so much. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for your contributions. We hope that this was helpful. We will be uploading the video of this to anyone that wishes to see it, and we'll send you some instructions.
Can
And
you
with-
kill the share screen so we can see everybody in the gallery view?
Hello.
That way we get to see everybody.
Cindy, I just want to take a moment and thank you and the International Service Team for putting this series of 3 webinars together. They've been highly, highly instructional, informative, and really gave our district understanding of how we can connect with the world and do more around the world. So thank you so much for leading that for us. These are great, and they all are available on our district YouTube channel. So so thank you for doing this these last 3 months.
Thank you. We have a great team. So with that, sleep well. Go to the next Zoom meeting that you all have, and we will see you again. Thank you. And again, any questions, you have our contact, please get a hold of us. We're here to help you.
Thank you very
Good
much.
night. Good night,
Thank you, everybody.
everybody.
All right,
Good
good
night.
night.
Ron, good to see you, Ron.
All right, good.